Good evening. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to the first public meeting for the Hellam Hills Conservation Area Master Plan. I'm Brandon Tennis, Senior Vice President of Stewardship for the Lancaster Conservancy. Later, I will be joined by other Conservancy senior staff, including President Phil Wanger, Senior Vice President of Community Impact, Fritz Schroeder, Senior Vice President of Land Protection and General Counsel, Kate Gonick, and Director of Marketing and Communications, Kelly Snavely, will be mostly working behind the scenes, or more so in this case, I suppose, behind the screens. Our staff is joined by the team of consultants selected to develop the Hellam Hills Master Plan, including Simone Collins, Resource Environmental Solutions, Revision, Forested, and AD Marble. Over the next hour or so, you will learn more about the Conservancy and our mission, the nature preserves that are the targets of this initiative, the impetus and purpose of this master planning process, and the work of our consultants. Most of our time this evening will be spent giving you the opportunity to ask questions and help us brainstorm. To participate in that, we will request that you use the Q&A button on your screen. But first, I'd like to provide you with some background. I'm wondering if everybody can hear me.
You're doing just fine, Brandon. Yes.
Everything is perfect.
Okay. Thank you. But first, I'd like to provide you with some background. The Lancaster Conservancy is a private nonprofit land trust with 50-year history of successfully providing wild and forested lands and clean waterways for our community forever. Meaning we preserve and care for forested and other natural lands through direct ownership of properties across all of Lancaster County, as well as within the York municipalities, including the Susquehanna Riverlands Conservation Landscape, or simply the Susquehanna River Corridor. We're able to do this work in thanks to our members, partners, donors, and other supporters. You can learn more about us in the Susquehanna Riverlands by visiting our website at lancasterconservancy.org or visit us on Facebook or Instagram. Hellam Hills Conservation Area, made up of the Hellam Hills Nature Preserve and Wizard Ranch Nature Preserve and consisting of 1,041 acres, is the fastest concentrated growth of preserved lands amongst all 46 of the Conservancy's nature preserves. In many respects, the Conservancy's growth in Hellam Hills is reflective of our success in other regions, such as Lancaster River Hills, consisting of 1,630 acres across 9 preserves built out since the 1970s, and Welsh Mountain, 960 acres in 1 preserve built out over the past decade. But the Conservancy has preserved land in Hellam Hills at an expedited, and for the Conservancy, an unprecedented rate. The Conservancy is the largest publicly accessible natural lands owner and manager in the Susquehanna Riverlands Conservation Landscape, second overall only to public utilities, which is shown as the brown bar on the graph. The Conservancy is purple. It's important to note that the different colored bars on the graph, including the brown bar for public utilities, but also the blue bar depicting state-owned lands and orange bar for local parks, all represent conglomerates of partner types. Whereas the Conservancy stands alone as one entity at 4,861 acres owned and actively managed in the Susquehanna Riverlands Conservation Landscape for forest health, ecosystem function, habitat, passive recreation, and preserved view sheds of natural lands. Lancaster and York County Parks and Recreation, combined, shown as the green bar on the graph, own least amongst all partners overall, except in the York North region of the Susquehanna Riverlands Conservation Landscape, shown as yellow on the map, where York County Parks and Recreation was the long-standing champion of public lands. However, within the past 5 years, the Conservancy quickly became the largest public lands manager in the northern region of York County within the Susquehanna River Corridor, with its acquisitions in Hellam Hills accounting for 48% of all publicly accessible natural lands within this region. The Conservancy's mission is to protect and care for natural lands, including habitat, ecosystem function, and passive recreation. The caring for land we call stewardship. Rather than stewarding elements of these properties as piecemeal, such as we've been doing in the River Hills region as example, the Conservancy has the opportunity to plan for the management and use of Hellam Hills and Wizard Branch nature preserves together with intention and input from our neighbors, partners, and stakeholders. Throughout 2020, the Conservancy led an initiative called the Integrated Land Management Plan, or ILMP for short. The ILMP process developed a coalition of land management partners such as county parks, state parks, Game Commission, Bureau of Forestry, and the Conservancy, among others, committed to work together to manage publicly accessible natural lands holistically, meaning across boundaries, and collaboratively, meaning across ownership. Thus, the Conservancy views the Hellam Hills Master Plan as the first of all ILMP partners to plan long-term for its preserve through this lens and partnership. And already bringing the Conservancy's mission to Hellam Hills supports the vision within Hellam Township's comprehensive recreation park and open space plan, a 10-year plan, last updated in 2014. We plan to be even more aligned by the 2024 revision. With funding provided by the National Park Service, the Conservation Fund, and support from the DCNR Bureau of Recreation and Conservation, the Conservancy is setting forth on a master planning process for its nature preserves that make up the Hellam Hills Conservation Area. The vision for this planning process is to develop a holistic master plan for Hellam Hills Nature Preserve and Wizard Ranch Nature Preserve that focuses on the preserve's unique ecosystem health, function, and habitat as sustained, or better yet, improved, and then balanced with passive recreation opportunities, including access points, accessible landscape features, both natural and built, trails, and other compatible public uses. Secondary is to embrace this project within the context of the Integrated Land Management Plan in respects to natural resource management, partnerships in conservation and stewardship, and passive recreation opportunities. Lastly, to build a rapport with our York neighbors, local government, and other stakeholders in Hellam Hills as a community that is new to the Conservancy and our mission as a land trust. With that brief introduction, I welcome you again, and I will now introduce our lead consultant of Simone Collins. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon, and thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Peter Simone. I'm a landscape architect with the firm of Simone Collins Landscape Architecture. With me tonight from our firm is Sarah Leeper, who's our project manager, and Rob Gladfelter, who's the project landscape architect. And we're really fortunate to work with a real expert team on this endeavor. Mike McGraw with Resource Environmental Solutions, formerly known as Applied Ecological Services, is with us tonight. Hi, Mike. Jesse Buckner. Revision Architecture, represented tonight by their principal, Scott Kelly. Forested, who are experts in permaculture and forest gardening or forest gardens. We're very excited to have Lincoln with us for that expertise. And then AD Marble, who are experts in environmental compliance in terms of permitting. Our project team, again, as lead consultant, we're landscape architects and planners, and we're responsible for working with our team and the professionals at the Lancaster Conservancy to put together this master plan. Res are our scientists and environmental experts. They're in the process of doing an ecological assessment of the lands, and as Brandon alluded to enhance and protect these lands. Revision Architecture will be creating conceptual designs for any structures or facilities we have on these properties to support human interaction with the environment. Forested, as I mentioned, brings a real special expertise with looking for opportunities to have permaculture applications on parts of the lands as appropriate. And as I mentioned, AD Marble, we're going to be looking at the cultural resources on these sites, which are quite extensive if you know the history of these properties. Our steering committee from the Conservancy, I'm not going to read everyone's name here, but certainly these are folks with incredible experience and expertise in this realm of work, open space, wildlands protection. In addition to folks from the Conservancy, we have Lori Ike from Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, which is an important partner, and also Jackie Kramer from the National Park Service, who provided part of the funding for the study. And you can see the little sort of honeycomb matrix we put together of project partners. And as Brandon mentioned, no organization can do this on their own. So all of you as partners, and these are just a few, and I'm not going to read the names here, but you can see who they are going to be very important. And through this process, we hope to add more partners to this list. The first question tonight was submitted by Bart Lease, if I have his last name right. And Bart said, I'm happy to attend and I'm anxious to see the plans. Well, Bart, we don't have any plans right now, and that's why you're here tonight. We've got over 90 participants, and we really want to hear what you want to see in the properties, what things interest you, and what your vision is, so that we can start to formulate a program and a plan in the next several months. A master plan is not a document for construction. It's a conceptual document. And if you go to the lower horizontal bar, you can see that it consists of collecting site data, doing site analysis, which is our primary charge right now, but also in order to develop a plan, to develop a site program. And that's what these public meetings are about, to hear from the community about things that you would like to see, and working with the land and our partners developing that program. After we have a program, we will start to develop preliminary concepts, which we will come back to you at future public meetings for you to review. When we get to our third public meeting, we'll have a draft plan. And then by the end of the study, which is not until March of 2022, we'll have a final master plan. And we come back to that top horizontal bar, and the Conservancy, with its partners, hopefully, will be looking to secure funding to do whatever design and engineering is needed, or environmental restoration work, go to construction, and then there'll be a completed improvement. And that work will go on for a number of years. There'll be phases of improvements. Nothing happens overnight. So this will take some time to fully implement. And of course, in a landscape like this, it's a dynamic environment where things are always changing. And as land managers and stewards, the Conservancy has to react to those changes. One of those important changes is climate change. So we have to also think about what this ground is going to be like, and not only in 10 years from now, but maybe 75 or 100 years from now. The goals of the Conservancy are aspirational, to say the least. And as we look at all the project tasks that have to be done, and again, I won't read these, and this presentation will be available on the Conservancy website in a couple days, so you can review this in more detail. But there's a lot to do here. There's a lot of moving parts. So as we go through this process in the next 13 months or so, we'll be going through all these various tasks to come up with a master plan. I mentioned the project schedule, and I want to just lay this out for you so that you can anticipate when we can get back together. Our next public meeting is going to be on September 7th. At that meeting, we're going to present analysis and initial concepts. In January, we will have a draft plan, which is a preliminary plan, and that plan will be open for a 60-day public review and comment period. We'll take those comments, work with our study committee, make changes to the draft plan, and be back with a final master plan at the end of March of next year. So I think it's obvious there's a lot of time in this process. There's going to be a lot of time for all of you to interact with us and the Conservancy professionals as we develop this plan. I mentioned the Conservancy's goals, which are very ambitious and very aspirational. And we want to blend the Conservancy's goals with those of the township and the borough and the county. We want to look at the Susquehanna Riverlands Conservation Landscape goals, and also the Integrated Land Management Plan goals, which are also very ambitious. And as the project goes on, if you don't have access to some of these plans, we'll make sure that we make that information available to you through web links if you'd like to look at some of these plans, because they all are very important in the overall project here. we hope that the Hellam Hills Master Plan will serve as a pilot study for our partners in the region for conservation of other lands too. In terms of the project approach, Hellam Hills, as you know, historically was a part of a water company site that fed water under the river to the communities on the other side of the Susquehanna. So it has a very interesting history. It has some great sensitive resources and habitats. And there we think we're gonna be looking primarily at preservation and conservation. Wizard Ranch is more of a cultural landscape or a working landscape. As you may know, the Conservancy obtained that ground from the Boy Scouts. The Boy Scouts are still going to come back every couple of years to do their jamboree. And that's more of a disturbed site. So we're going to be looking at how we can restore that ground and maybe have some innovative types of activities in that area. And together they'll form the Hellam Hills Conservation Area Master Plan. So that's sort of a very brief summary of our work. And before we get to the Q&A period, I'm going to ask Rob Gladfelter to start going over some of the existing conditions with you.
Thank you, Pete. So if we look at the Hellam Hills Conservation Area, again, we'll just go over this again, that consists of the Hellam Hills and the Wizard Ranch Preserve, which provide 1,041 acres of preserved land. Surrounding these properties are also lands that have conservation easements and agriculture security area lands, or ASAs. The ASAs are not permanently preserved, but they do offer incentives to keep these lands from being developed in the future. And this adds to the richness and important habitats within this area. There's parklands to the north side of the river that also has the Northwest Lancaster County River Trail that meanders through it. And we also have the Mason-Dixon Trail on the south side that enters through portions of this conservation area. And as we mentioned already, that both preserves offer unique characteristics that we're going to further describe as we dive into each of them. This is the Helm Hills Preserve, which is the largest of the two with 794 acres. And it's mostly forested and leads itself really to be preserved as a forest. This site is primarily known for its water utilities that used the two streams that went through it as water sources for nearing areas. Also, you can find remnants of dams that would have recently been removed from this area. The recent parcel purchase in that center also gives this space an amazing dynamic view on top of Buzzard's Roost, which is one of the high points in this area. There's also defined trails, including the Mason-Dixon Trail from past property owner that put some trails through it, and we'll be mapping those out. And also then at this point, we're going to pass this over to Mike. So Mike can give a more description of the site, as we noticed from our first site visit.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So I'll just note that my colleague Jesse Buckner and I super excited about this project. We started our ecological assessment just a few weeks ago in mid-March, visiting the site, a lot of ground to cover. And we're enacting a variety of scientifically valid methods to collect data on flora and fauna. We will not end up with a fully comprehensive inventory of either, but we're going to get a really good snapshot. I'm excited that the project schedule lends us to both the growing season, migratory season for birds, activity seasons for reptiles and amphibians, et cetera. So really this first trip was a big snapshot, and some of the take homes, some of the steep topography and the ridges that have really shallow soil and exposed bedrock. There's some really nice intact hardwood communities. We're seeing a paucity of invasive species and a good native scenario. Even though it was historically logged, it wasn't pastured or in other more harsh land uses. But there are areas, including both the runs, Wildcat and Dugan runs, where we found significant erosion and some effects coming off of the road. So we're thoroughly documenting those. Within the floodplains, there's significant invasive species that, again, we're mapping and documenting to come up with a restoration plan to support this amazing space. So we've during that first trip, we documented over 30 bird species, including a bird that likely won't have significant habitat requirements on the site, but is always lovely to see a golden eagle soaring overhead, interacting with one of the local bald eagles. Here you can see some wood frog egg masses. This was in Wildcat Run, and a northern dusky salamander to the right there. Very notable that there are, despite some significant erosion in the primary tributaries, there's a lot of seepage wetlands that support these streams that are really intact and quite wonderful, significant critical habitat for amphibians and potentially some rare plant species. So yeah, really excited to dive into this project, and we're hoping that some of you will be willing to continue with some citizen science where we lay out these fixed bird points through this process. We're hoping you'll come back and want to collect data to further support that body of wildlife data for the site.
Great, thanks, Mike. And then with the next preserve, the Wizard Ranch Preserve, this is 248 acres, and this was recently purchased from the Boy Scouts, as mentioned before, but with an agreement that there will be ongoing access for the Boy Scouts for future events. This is what we consider a cultural landscape, being that it experienced much more disturbance from past use, has large fields and open spaces, and it also features some different streams that run through the space as well as some more dynamic open views to like neighboring properties. There's also an assisting trail system and also some assisting structures on site that we'll be investigating more as we investigate more of this property. And with that, then we'll go back to Mike so he can talk a little bit more about some of the stuff that we saw during our site visit.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So similar to Hellam's, there's just some really amazing opportunity. There's some nice intact forested ridges, but as Rob mentioned, and you can see in the aerial, there's a lot of large fields that have been maintained with cool season grasses or whatever. And I think that offers some significant opportunity, not only on the ecological restoration side, but also on the cultural side, bringing people to the space, being able to interact. We're super excited that we have a professional that does food forests and permaculture on the team. I think there's some exciting opportunities here. So we're really excited about using our skills and experience as restoration ecologists to focus on early successional habitat types here. And for any of you nature nerds out there like me, you'll know that mature forests are absolutely critical and wonderful, and Hellam Hills will likely be nearly entirely stewarded in that fashion. But successional habitat types and disturbance in nature is absolutely critical, and we have many vertebrates and plant species and invertebrates, frankly, that have co-evolved to really depend upon some of these early successional meadows, shrub, scrub, and teenage forests. So we see some really cool opportunities to diversify the wildlife and botanical viewing experiences within the complex of these two spaces here at the Wizard Ranch. With that, I think I'll pass it to Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Michael and Rob. If you can't tell, we could talk for a couple of hours about this site, what we've seen so far, and some of the opportunities, but we're constraining ourselves so we can get to your ideas and your questions. So don't forget to start typing in your questions, and we'll try to address those. So this next part of the program is where we hopefully say less and we listen to you and say what your questions are, and then we'll go to the right person on our team or from the Conservancy to try to address them. What we do is you ask these questions is we divide them into categories for our own purposes. You know, some might be goals for the project. I mean, obviously developing a master plan is a goal. The facts are really critical. I mean, those of you who have spent time on these properties are going to know things that we will never know unless you tell us. So it's very important that you share that information with us. And then the third category of ideas are concepts. How you see us meeting the goals for the project. How do we enhance the site? How do we help preserve it? What types of facilities might help with human interaction while we still protect these resources? And as you give us these ideas tonight, we're going to be typing them up on a spreadsheet. And if we were with you in person, if you go to the next slide, we'd put these on a wall and we'd have these in various categories. So we're going to do that on a spreadsheet, which we can go to as we need to. And these are just some examples, like the quarry under, excuse me, the preserve under facts is 1,041 acres. We have some existing trails. Concepts, water resource management is going to be very important. A food forest idea is something we're very excited about. Are there ways that the Conservancy can generate some income so they can help pay for the continued stewardship of the site? One of the things that Brandon mentioned is how fast the Conservancy has grown and acquired ground. Well, the stewardship of that ground comes with a cost. And so we're going to explore ideas that might generate some income to help pay for some of that stewardship. And the partners we mentioned, and all of you, we've got over 100 people now participating in this meeting. All of you, of course, are very important partners. So that's really our presentation. And I'm amazed that we're actually on time with that because we could have, as I mentioned, we could have all talked more about the existing preserves and what we've seen. So what we're going to do now is go to your questions. My colleague, Sarah Leeper, is going to read the questions that you've typed in. We'll go in order and then we'll try to answer them the best we can, or if we don't know, we'll tell you we don't know and we'll get back to you. So Sarah, do you want to start with the first set of questions?
First question we have came in from an anonymous attendee. It states, I live along the border of Accomack Road and I'm very excited that Lancaster Conservancy has acquired this land. I would like to know how the volunteer specifically for work related to this land. My husband and I use the land frequently for hiking. I would like to see the trails maintained and he with this as well. There is also a very high deer population in mini Turkey. I know that some of the Conservancy land is open for hunting. I would like to see archery hunting there.
Yeah, thanks for that question and comment. Certainly, hunting is one of the activities we're going to consider for these properties. And I think, I'm sure the Conservancy's ears perked up when you said you'd like to be a volunteer. So please reach out to them or us and we'll put you in contact with the good folks at the Conservancy because, and you're our first preserve champion tonight. Thank you for volunteering because no organization can steward these sites all by themselves.
Peter, could I add real quick? This is Mike. For the ecological data collection, we are likely going to set up some sort of iNaturalist, a free something that you could download on your phone. And when you're out there hiking or enjoying the space, if you see a plant that looks funky, whether you know it or not, or a bird species, a snake, an insect, if you could easily take that picture and post it to iNaturalist, and we could review those and ID those and bring all of your observations as citizen scientists into the inventory process. So that's just another way that you might be able to help actively play a role during the master planning process.
Great, thank you, Mike. Our next question comes in from Adam Miller, and he is curious if we're aware of any trout in either of the runs. Mike, have you guys observed trout in either of the streams at Helm?
Yeah, so again, we're just getting started on our survey. We do not have permits to do fish shocking, so we're not going to go to that level of detail with our inventory. However, we will take a close look at secondary data, how PA Fish and Boat Commission has qualified these streams, and converse with the Fish and Boat Commission to determine if they have done any fish inventory data collection in these reaches. Also, that said, I am very familiar with trout species, and so when we're out here, maybe we'll get lucky and we'll actually see some fish and be able to confirm that. But it's a great question, and there's definitely some potential with the direct connection to the river. So it's yeah, great question.
Yeah, and if anybody on the meeting tonight has information about that, please forward it to us.
Our next question comes in from Richard Zook, and he is recommending or asking for picnicking on site. So we'll type that into our sheet.
We'll certainly consider that. And I think Richard also asked, how can we help evaluate these lands? We'll show you, we have contact information at the end of the presentation tonight. So we encourage you to reach out to us. We'll put you in touch with other team members as appropriate. So as I mentioned, your knowledge of probably being on these lands for a number of years is really going to be helpful to us.
Thank you. From Wendy Cutright, will the public have access to all or any of this land?
Yeah, I mean, that's an important question to answer. I think, you know, the secondary mission of the Conservancy is definitely to provide passive recreational opportunities for the lands that they're stewards for. So I would say the answer is going to be yes, with the caveat that if there are really unique resources that need protection in places, we may recommend, you know, not having human access to every inch of these lands if there are some things that really bear protection. And that'll be based on Mike and Jesse's inventory and evaluation of these lands, how sensitive the resources are, and how we can balance, you know, human use of the land with protection of those resources.
Peter, if I'll chime in, Brandon with the Lancaster Conservancy. Hellam Hills Nature Preserve already has a section of the Mason-Dixon Trail rerouted through it. That was one of the first things that the Conservancy did when this land was under agreement. We partnered with the Mason-Dixon Trail System to try to get the trail, which beneath Wrightsville is almost single track the whole way down to the Chesapeake. It's absolutely wonderful. Above Wrightsville here in our areas of Wizard Ranch Nature Preserve and Hellam Hills Nature Preserve, it was all road walk. So the Conservancy did partner with the Mason-Dixon Trail System, and we have already done a phase 1 rerouting of 2.5 miles of the Mason-Dixon Trail through the Hellam Hills Nature Preserve. So there are 2 access points for that. We can let you know where they are. Take a look at, look up Mason-Dixon Trail System, take a look at Lancaster Conservancy webpage. You'll find those access points, but that is open for the public to use. We would say, please stick to blazed trails. There's very few of them, but there is a lot of trail-like features on the preserve that aren't necessarily going to be maintained as trails. So please stick to what's blazed, and yeah, get in there and take a look at the property for yourself if you haven't seen it already.
Thank you, Brandon. And that does, I think that addresses James Hooper. I wasn't familiar with the M/DTS abbreviation for the Mason-Dixon Trail System, but that addresses his question about relocation. And just to clarify, everyone, that is a blue blaze if you're out hiking the site.
And Sarah, to clarify probably on Jim's question here is Jim speaking to you directly and everybody else who cares and invests into the Mason-Dixon Trail. We understand that phase 1 of bringing the Mason-Dixon Trail onto the property was phase 1, get it from point A to point B, get it off of the road, use existing infrastructure. We understand that there are the greatest highs on the high points on the preserve, and there are really wonderful low points down along some waterfalls. And we understand the nature of the Mason-Dixon Trail and that you would like to have the trail highlight all of those features. We would like to do that right with you, Jim. So we're getting ready for a phase 2 and a phase 3. Please stay engaged in this process with us and Simone Collins.
Great, thank you, Brandon. From Angie Gambler, will you keep power feed to Wizard Ranch? And if so, will power company have access in case of electrical outage?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Certainly our initial impression is if we have facilities, the Wizard Ranch may make more sense since it's a disturbed site already. And I would anticipate we'll have electric power, or maybe better yet, we may have solar power. So Revision Architects are a very sustainable architectural firm, and you know, keep tuned on that one. We may be also proposing photovoltaics if it's appropriate.
Thank you. From Bart Leases, any plans to acquire more land in the area?
Yeah, at this point, there are no definite plans to do that. I mean, as an agency that, or an organization that preserves land, if there are property owners who are interested in talking to the Conservancy, I'm sure they're going to be happy to talk with you.
From Angie Gambler again, are there any ideas for parking areas at the Wizard Ranch?
Again, great question. You know, we always describe parking as a necessary evil because we all drive automobiles to get to these great resources. So I would anticipate we're going to have parking at a few locations over the preserve, and Where exactly they are, we don't know yet, but you know, obviously near existing roads where we're not intruding on neighbors and things like that. So again, we haven't put pen to paper yet, and we're still in evaluating the ground for what works for infrastructure like that.
Great. I am going to just hop over to the chat here because we do have some good ideas that are coming up in the chat that I want to get captured in our spreadsheet here. One is that there are bluegills in the River Ranch Pond. And then the other is that they appreciate that there is no hunting along the Mason-Dixon Trail and surrounding areas.
Thanks.
Jumping back over to questions, Rick Cooper asked, do you have a proposed trail system?
Yeah, again, good question, and not yet. Again, these are all really great questions. It's just we're not that far along. We don't have any plans yet for, except for the Mason-Dixon Trail. But if we see, you know, if we see opportunities where, you know, the sections of it could still be relocated, we'll certainly make that recommendation.
Yeah, and then I would just add also at River or Wizard Ranch, there are trails that are culturally placed on that preserve, and we'll be looking at them to, you know, determine if they're in appropriate alignments or if we can improve some of those alignments of trails over there as well. From Daniel Tanner, what studies are you planning to do to control the deer population and the damage to adjacent residential property that is occurring since you have taken over Hellam Hills and have limited hunting?
Yeah, every natural land project we're involved with has deer browsing problems or challenges, I should say. So again, I don't have an answer for you tonight, but it's something we have to look at. In addition to doing damage to residential properties, as you know, when deer concentrations get so large, they start to destroy understory, which is important bird habitat and habitat for other species. Mike, I don't know, or Jesse, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I'll go first if that's all right, and leave space for Jesse to comment if she'd like as well. So again, we're not going to be doing on certain projects. I do full deer management studies. That's not within our scope for the master plan. However, we are going to be understanding relative distribution and a general understanding of density of deer and how they're using the site through a variety of survey methods. We're going to be looking at scat, doing some rough pellet counts. I may put up some camera traps to understand some of the larger mammal species that are present on the site. And we will provide recommendations that are based on ecology. You know, it's up to the Conservancy and their goals and ideals on how they want to manage anything like hunting, which can have implications for other land users. But from an ecological perspective, we recognize this is a keystone species. Overpopulations of deer often require active management by man to not cause significant proliferation of invasive species, loss of native plants, et cetera. So great question, and we'll definitely be looking into it and providing some informed recommendations in this planning process.
Great.
And the only thing I would add to that is that this is another scenario where the public is going to have the best idea. You're able to be out there a lot more frequently than Mike and I are. So if you have recommendations or not recommendations, but observations of really highly populated deer areas or deer bedding areas or feeding areas, you can pass that information along to us to help us in our study.
Thank you. From John Effort, how would the types of programs that the public would like to use and enjoy be defined?
Yeah. If I understand your question, John, you know, Brendan mentioned that the focus of recreational use of preserved properties or passive recreation, of course. So I would say they're going to be defined based on the resources that need to be protected or enhanced, but also the interests of the community. So, you know, we're at the beginning of the process. We want to see what your ideas are and then see if they can be married to the land in a way that's balanced.
Great. Following up on that, Richard Zook, compared to the preserves at in southern Lancaster and York County, Hellam Hills is easily accessible to large populations. Can the access be controlled so it is not overrun?
Yeah, great question. We often have challenges, or we're challenged by trying to determine what is the carrying capacity of the site. And there's no easy answer to that. Certainly, controlling parking is one way to limit a site being overrun. We are talking about over 1,000 acres. So it is a lot of ground. And when people are moving through on a trail system, a piece of ground that large can accommodate a lot of people. And you may see very few of them when you're on the site. But it's a really good question. And it's a challenging one to answer. And part of that answer lies also in the sensitivity of the resources that we see and how our team determines they should be best protected.
Great. From Ed Wilson, there may be opportunities for larger landscape planning to connect the Hellam Hills area to other resources in the area, such as Rocky Ridge Park, the Horn Farm, Sam Lewis Park, High Point, and the Native Lands Park. Will you consider these broader connections as you develop the master plan?
Yeah, absolutely. Part of our charge also, and it relates to the previous question about what facilities might be considered. We want to look at regional trail connections within the whole Susquehanna Preserve landscape, how trail connections or even road connections can make those connections. But we need to understand what facilities are at some of the parks and preserves that you mentioned. We don't want to unnecessarily duplicate things that might be available close by. Yeah, great question. And to make those connections in a sustainable way can be challenging. But I think we have to be realistic. It's not all going to be done with trails.
Thank you. Again, from an attendee, very exciting. We have been hiking through some of the lands and have found a combination of pink and orange flags. It appears that they may represent possible new trail paths, or do they represent something else? Wendy Tippett and Toby Richards.
Yeah, Brandon or somebody from the Conservancy, do you want to address that one?
I'm assuming what you're seeing there is at least partially some of the work that the volunteers with the Mason-Dixon Trail System has flagged out later phases of proposed reroutes of the Mason-Dixon Trail. Those are some of the flaggings that I've been seeing in regards to pink in particular. They're linear and they're making their way around to some of the best points of the preserve. So that's the work that those volunteers are doing. And yes, we'd like to be able to incorporate their proposed vision. We totally recognize the fact that the Mason-Dixon Trail System, as a group of very skilled volunteers, manage a fantastic trail that goes across multiple of the Conservancy's nature preserves. We love what that group does. I think that's the flags that you're seeing out there. We want to make sure that we get them recorded and are able to consider the proposals from that trail group.
Great. James is sharing with us the fact that there is an iron mine located, I'm guessing, on the Hellam Hills Preserve. Brandon, has your team come across that mine yet?
No, not at least that we've identified it as an iron mine. That might be a little bit new. Jim, we know each other well enough. Let's touch base and you can tell me whereabouts that is. Thank you.
From John Efert, will certain types of programs the public would like to bring in, will certain types of programs the public would like to bring in require more revenue?
Yeah, I guess what you're asking there, John, is, I think the basic premise is the site where we have trails, the site will be open for no fee to the public, certainly. But there may be, fee for service activities for some facilities, perhaps, just like if you go to a county park or municipal park, they might have a swimming pool, for example, that you pay a fee for, or some type of a class where there's a donation. So again, we haven't determined what those things might be. You could have, with the Boy Scout facility, one of the things that they do when they have their jamborees, they have like ropes courses and challenge courses and things that they do as activities. Well, could those types of things be more of a permanent installation? where local companies bring in, 10 or 15 people to do team building? And would there be a fee to use those facilities? So those are just initial ideas. We want to hear more ideas from all of you. But again, one of the benefits of something like that is in a natural lands preserve like this, we mentioned we need partners. And how do you get people interested in being a partner with the Conservancy toward the continued protection? You bring them in, you have a program, and not only do they benefit with interactions with the people they work with, for example, or maybe it's a church group or some other fraternal organization, they become interested in this land, and they can become stewards as the preservation goes forward. So there are lots of benefits here, but again, we're at the beginning of this process, and I'm sure many of you will have great ideas how we might do that.
From Greg, I live on Chimney Rock Road. I would like to work directly with you for the hunting rights and impact on the deer and turkey corridors so that hunters don't overly impact herd numbers and adversely impact surrounding properties as well. Is this possible?
Yeah, thanks, Greg, for the suggestion. Yeah, I just say reach out to us. We will help you initiate that conversation with us and more importantly, the Conservancy.
And we'll be sharing our contact information at the end of tonight. From Julie, thank you. What an opportunity and what a carefully thought out process you are managing. I live along River Drive and highly value this land and its preservation. Many of my neighbors and I are a bit concerned about the volume of traffic on River Drive that could be generated. Has any thought be given to access points and buffers to private landowners?
Yeah, I think we have to consider buffers to landowners. I mean, in any preserved landscape, one of the things we always try to do is be good neighbors. And so yeah, we think that's very important, and thanks for bringing it up.
From Keith, I noticed the properties include several points of river frontage. I would encourage the development of a public boat launch. There's a lack of public access on the river on the York County side of this stretch.
Yeah, thanks for that suggestion. We definitely will look at that idea.
From our next attendee, I am certain the York County Master Watershed Stewards would be willing to be boots on the ground for you. We have over 70 volunteers available.
Wow, awesome. Thank you. Again, reach out to us. We'll get that conversation moving forward. Thank you very much.
From our next attendee, will the farmers still be cutting the Wizard Ranch fields for hay?
Yeah, Mike, do you want to address that one?
I do. Thanks so much. Yeah, we know each other well. I am far from anti-agriculture for a variety of reasons, and I do a lot of bird research in working lands on agricultural landscapes. Two reasons why I would strongly recommend we continue some haying until we start implementing ecological restoration. One is, if we just let those fields go fallow, they're going to become rampant. They're going to rapidly be colonized by invasive species. And then also, the person that's haying those fields, I'm sure it's some level of revenue generation. So there's dual back scratching right now, keeping it in an open setting. What I would recommend is a bird-friendly harvest of that hay. So sometimes haying can be done a few times a year on certain landscapes. Just strictly speaking, from the life history of breeding birds that may be attracted to a hayfield, like a bobolink or an eastern meadowlark, if we could hold off harvesting that hay, cutting that hay until August 1 or even a little later, that would be a win-win. So I would say, and again, ultimately, this is up to the Conservancy. We're just making recommendations. But I would suggest to keep going with haying, just modify the mowing to make sure it's bird friendly until we start rolling out some of these implementations within the plan.
Mike, I'm going to piggyback on that, please. This is Brandon with the Conservancy. So you will actually see hay being cut here this year on the Wizard Ranch property. The Conservancy is honoring the relationship that the farmer that was cutting the hay on the Wizard Ranch property under Boy Scouts. We're honoring that relationship and that contract with the farmer, but it is in the interim until a final decision is made through the master planning process. So you will see You will see the local farmer. If you know them, you will see the local farmer out there this summer cutting hay on the Wizard Ranch property.
Thank you, Brandon. We have a suggestion or question from Tammy Bray. Are bike trails being considered for this land?
Yeah, I think at this point, we're looking at all options. And again, we haven't made any decisions. The other thing I'm going to mention for all of us is we've got 43 questions in the queue. So especially for myself, I'm going to try to answer these questions or just acknowledge them more quickly so we get to everybody's questions.
From Cynthia, Lancaster Hiking Club and several meetup groups like Stoga are very willing to help with trail maintenance and stewardship. So Rob, if you want to list them as partners, that would be great. Going over to Alyssa, could you create rentable spaces, destination areas within the preserves as a way to generate some income for management cost?
Awesome idea. We definitely want to look at that idea. Thank you.
From Greg, is there early consideration for providing parking access at Wizard Ranch? I know this pushes any timeline you are working within.
Again, great suggestion. We're going to look at that. Again, we want to do parking in a sensitive way. So rather than rush, we want to do it right, but we understand folks would like to have access.
From Cynthia, the Conservancy is primarily for conservation. Parking is always a usage issue, as is overuse of trails, portage-on facilities, etc. As a serious hiker, I'm very concerned about ATVs and mountain bikes. I'm also really interested in reroute of the Mason-Dixon Trail and very happy to get off the road as much as possible.
Great, thank you.
From Brent, any plan to show the iron mining history of the Hellam Hills land linked to the Cadoris furnace? They contain old iron ore pits and charcoal production flats.
Yeah, we don't have a plan, but now we do. So thanks for letting us know about that.
Yeah, and if Brent, if you're able to share any links or history you have on that, that would be great. From John, how would the bordering residents' concern on noise or trespassing be addressed?
Again, I think that comes down to being sensitive to neighbors, where we have access points, and also, you know, informing people about a proper etiquette when they're guests on the Conservancy property.
From Melissa, can you talk more about archaeological findings, protections, and accessibility?
We're learning tonight about some of the possible history of the site. We've seen some of the structures from the former water companies historically. So certainly, I will tell you that one of the reasons AD Marble is on the team, that if a conservancy uses any federal funds or goes through some state processes, we have to do required archaeological research to make sure we're not disturbing important resources. So it is a consideration. We're not going to get into the nuts and bolts of it during the master plan, but we are going to note it and make sure we're aware of it as we discover and understand those resources.
Okay. From Jennifer, could you perhaps create an educational program there to share the unique features of the property that are being specially preserved? One that can be enjoyed independently as someone hikes, or also through classes as well?
Yeah, I think sharing that information is important. And one of the things I think I remember, cell phone service wasn't too bad out there. So there's opportunities to do, you know, our smartphone application. So when you're out on the site, you can access that information, and you know, there could be self-guided tours. And you know, one of the things we certainly will probably have at some point some interpretive signage, but you can overdo that too. So I think technology today gives us ways to inform people in a very non-intrusive way.
Thank you. From Daniel, will there be a safe trail crossing over Dugan's Run?
I don't know. We'll look at that. Important crossing.
From Steve, will you be adding a boat launch and parking on the river frontage?
Yeah, we don't know yet. Certainly it was earlier, as you know, suggested. So we'll look at that idea.
From Dan, will consideration be given to mountain biking and or gravel biking on either of the parcels? River Road is a popular biking route, and the use of the land to incorporate some off-road cycling would be very popular.
Yeah, we certainly are going to consider that, and happy to hear more ideas about it.
From an attendee, will there be an economic impact study for the surrounding communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not really in our scope per se. Maybe it's a future undertaking of the Conservancy, but there, typically there should be a positive economic impact, but we'll consider that moving forward.
From another attendee, some of Wizard Ranch could demonstrate how homeowners can landscape responsibly with native plants and to help people make their own riparian borders for small streams.
Yeah, great idea. And I want to see if Lincoln Smith from Forested wants to comment on that. One of the reasons he's on the team is because he's an expert in permaculture and food forests, which is could be similar to what you just suggested there, Lincoln.
Sure. One of the things that we do with food forests is try out growing a lot of different edibles, mostly native species, producing amazing foods that a lot of people aren't familiar with just because they have no experience with it. And we found that it's a really neat way to engage people with the environment through foods. Being based here near DC, even people that have been to fancy restaurants have sometimes never encountered an American persimmon or the American passion fruit or fiddlehead fern shoots to eat. So demonstrating those things can be an important way of getting people invested in their local forest ecosystem.
Great, thanks, Lincoln.
Hey, I'll just add real quick too. I completely agree that the Wizard Ranch would be a great location to have an example of a slightly more formal but all native, just aesthetically pleasing garden as well, right? A good example where someone could come and be inspired on what they could do in their front yard. Hopefully there'll be food foresting in their backyard too, or front yard.
Yeah, and piggybacking on that idea, Richard shares that this area has acres of pawpaws, which we have seen a lot of those on site. From Jess, who owns the White Blaze Trail off of the Mason-Dixon Trail that runs along Wildcat Run?
Go ahead, Brandon.
That is a Conservancy blazed trail. So the idea of that trail is it's a way to connect Furnace Road through the Mason-Dixon Trail down to Wildcat Bluff. Please do respect the house that's on Wildcat Bluff. We do have somebody that is renting that space, but the trail will not take you directly to the house. It routes you around the house and it puts you onto basically a cliffside. So certainly be careful there, but it's a phenomenal view of the river. So that is a sanctioned trail. There's blue blazes for the Mason-Dixon Trail, white blazes for that Wildcat Bluff Overlook Trail. And other than those, if it looks like a trail, please just respect it and stay off of it for now. Just stay what's on blaze, but enjoy both of them.
Great, thank you, Brandon. From Steve, we would like consideration for handicap access, even thinking about controlled hunts for wounded warriors and others using qualified volunteer guides, etc., to help control the deer herd.
Yeah, handicap access is absolutely going to be incorporated in this plan for all kinds of reasons. It's not only we're required to do it when we can by law, but it's the right thing to do. And if we can have special use groups using accessible trails to make activities like hunting available, if there is hunting on the property, that would be tremendous.
I'll just add that I've personally participated in the design, implementation, and study of the deer populations for two different handicap assist hunting programs, both in the Midwest. But the Wizard Ranch could potentially be a great spot to have that as a scheduled programmatic feature. Wonderful suggestion.
Great. From Julie, any thoughts about some bridle paths on the Wizard Ranch?
Yeah, you just added that thought, so yes.
Thank you. From another attendee, since Wizard Ranch is a disturbed site, is there an interest in adding any kind of sports facilities, baseball fields, soccer fields, disc golf course of that nature?
Yeah, again, the secondary mission of the Conservancy is passive recreation, so those sports fields really wouldn't fit in there. Having said that, open fields that both the scouts could use and other users could use certainly are a possibility without having formal fields. Disc golf is another activity that we've utilized successfully on a lot of preserved lands, and you see it on a lot of preserved lands. We would consider that a passive recreational activity that has pretty low impact. So hopefully that answers your question.
From Peter, backcountry camping opportunities.
Again, great idea. We certainly, I think we should certainly consider that. Thank you.
From Melissa, with building facilities on Wizard Ranch, are there opportunities for education facilities, AKA Mount Cuba, permaculture, natives, etc.?
Yeah, I think so. And I'd like to bring Scott Kelly in from Revision. Scott's firm are incredibly sensitive architects with designing architecture that fits to the land. Scott, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. So I think the direct answer is yes. It's influenced by the needs and the interests of the community, which is the information that we're getting from you right now. So for instance, the example of like a food forestry may need a building, may need a structure, or it may not. It may be for prep or for education. Perhaps we could reuse an existing structure. The question is, will it be safe? We have to just do this investigation to figure it out. And just because Mount Cuba was mentioned, we've worked on several structures there. So I am familiar with the educational programs and facilities at Mount Cuba, very familiar.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And the other thing that's come up internally with our discussion is, I mentioned stewardship and maintenance, and there's a possibility of considering a maintenance building here for these lands. So, Scott's an expert in terms of taking what might be a utilitarian structure and making it look like it always has belonged there. So I think that's, it's a functional need, but in Scott's hands, it can be beautiful and sustainable.
Yeah, culturally considered is a very big part of sustainability.
Right.
Yep. And kind of building on that idea from Jennifer, will there be restroom facilities on either property?
I hope so. As a frequent user of restrooms, I would endorse that.
From Jason, what are the prospects of allowing conscientious mountain biking through either or both of the properties?
Yeah, again, I think at this point, we're at the beginning of the process. We're going to consider all the ideas that are being voiced tonight. So certainly we're going to look at that.
From Philip, how do you plan to connect the two properties when there is private land between them?
Yeah, I think that there may be possibilities for trail easements. Again, we're not that far. Certainly each property could function on its own with its separate access. So, the use of these properties also will evolve. I mean, the Conservancy is at the very beginning of their stewardship, and the master plan will lay the groundwork for that. So it's a good question, and we just aren't far enough along to have an answer for that yet.
From Peter, will we consider the use of the old stone cabins on Wizard Ranch?
Absolutely. We're going to consider that. I think one of the functional or the basic considerations is, and Scott's going to evaluate this, is are they worth putting how much money into? Because they're pretty rustic. They might function as just open air sort of pavilions, but to be determined.
From the next attendee, you will want to, one second. Okay. There's a group of us watching with questions. Can you tell us more about the food forest idea, and will you consider collaborating with the Horn Farm Center to both demonstrate it and provide education for those who would like to create one? Could this be a potential source of revenue by selling educational consulting services for food forest creation and or sales of crops produced by the food forest at Horn Farm Center or on location at Wizard Ranch?
Yeah, sounds like a very cool idea. I mean, Lincoln, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, that's exactly what I do here in Bowie. So I'd certainly, as part of the process, really love to meet the local people that are already involved in food forests and see what's going on up there. I'm sure your knowledge of what grows well in the area would be great to know, and to network with what's already going on would of course make a lot of sense if it turned out to be appropriate for this location.
Peter, can I make comment, please? This is Brandon with the Conservancy. Because there's some interest in this, please know that the Lancaster Conservancy has actually established the Falmouth Forest Garden on the Kenoi Wetlands Nature Preserve just across the river from these sites here. It's right along the Northwest River Trail. It's 5.3 acres. It's entirely native food producing crop plants fit for riparian areas. So please know that the Conservancy is interested in that so much that we have actually already established a food forest, which is why we still remain open to the idea of agroforestry, food forest being an example, agroforestry as public lands management strategy. And we're very aware of Horn Farm Center. They actually donated materials to the Falmouth Food Forest. So we hope that they stay engaged with this project as well. Thanks for your interest there.
Yeah, and I would just follow up from Horn Farm. They share, hello there. The Horn Farm is a neighbor to Hellam Hills and Wizard Ranch. We are excited to explore partnerships as our entire 186 acres of the Horn Farm is also under conservation with the York County Farm and Natural Lands Trust. Our current stewardship activities and plans include water management, multifunctional riparian buffers, regenerative agriculture, polyculture food cultivation systems, and of course, we aim to educate and demonstrate in all our activities on the farm. Focus areas for Hellam Hills, Wizard Ranch, and HFC partnership might be wildlife corridors, flora and fauna data collection, water management demonstration for landowners, collaborative programming, and connecting the trail systems to the newer and growing trail system for the Horn Farm and beyond. We hope that Helm Township and the Susquehanna Riverlands can be a destination for eco and agritourism. From Alex Campbell, Executive Director of the Horn Farm Center for Agricultural Education. Thank you very much, Alex.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question, are you continuing to try to gain land to connect Hellam Hills to Wizard Ranch?
Again, I don't think there are any active plans right now, but certainly in the future, that could be a possibility.
If Wizard is a working landscape, what would Hellam Hills be considered?
Yeah, labels are tough. Maybe it's a conservation landscape. Certainly there's cultural aspects of what Hellam Hills happened there in the future with the water department. So we'll try to give it more appropriate labels going forward, and hopefully the master plan will reflect labels that are appropriate.
If we had to, for now, I would say conservation in those areas where there needs a little love from the past land use, but certainly preservation. There's some really wonderful intact systems that we'd like to preserve in that landscape. But as Peter mentioned, there's overlap, right? There's areas that we want to preserve and conserve at Wizard Ranch as well. So it's really just a broad, the 30,000 foot view to get thoughts going.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, from Gary, could camping either primitive near the Mason-Dixon Trail or more supported sites be considered? The Mason-Dixon offers the ability to through hike, and these options would help to support this opportunity.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
From Gordon, Wizard Ranch has been used as a campground site by the Scouts in the past. You said that they will be planning on using it periodically in the future. Is this site going to be open to public camping in the future?
Yeah, I think, we have to consider the distinction between just, I don't think anybody wants to turn this into a KOA campground. Not that there's anything wrong with KOA, but we don't think that type of use is important. I think it would be more targeted camping. The Boy Scouts are an occasional activity. So, to be determined.
From Greg, Will you consider predator control on both properties? I have seen coyotes and both red and gray fox over the years.
Yeah, Mike, that's.
Yeah,
gonna be
happy to jump in. First off, I'll say that's wonderful that you're seeing gray fox on the site. They continue to decline across the range. Absolutely wonderful, peculiar, arboreal, funky fox. So that's great news. Also, coyotes are a natural part of the system, and probably other than active hunting by humans, the only legit pressure keeping the deer herds honest. So I would say, unless there's some really overwhelming evidence to show an overpopulation, that we would actually celebrate the fact that there's a good trophic web that includes predators on the site.
And just following up with that, someone shared with us that vultures do raise their young in the stone cabin closest to Accomack Road. So that's on the Wizard Ranch site.
Mhm.
From our next attendee, you may want, will hunting permits be available for archery hunting?
Yeah, again, to be determined. Good question.
From Wendy, is there intent that there be a trail system similar to Rocky Ridge at either Wizard Ranch or Hellam Hill locations?
Yeah, I'm not totally familiar with the Rocky Ridge Trail, but certainly we're going to look at trails throughout both properties.
From Duran, lots and lots of pawpaws on Wizard Ranch. Turkey Hill says they have the largest natural pawpaw grove, but I think Wizard Ranch has more.
Okay.
Thank you.
That'll be a trivia question moving forward.
From Greg, what are your plans to control the human impact on neighboring properties, littering, dumping, etc., due to increasing travel on the Hellam Hills by creating it as a destination?
Yeah, that's a great question. The people who are going to come to Hellam Hills Preserve to enjoy it as it should be preserved aren't the folks who are going to be doing the dumping. But one of the best, you really bring up a security issue, and one of the best means of security for any park or open space is having eyes and ears and active stewards in the community, so that when types of things like that happen, it gets reported to the appropriate authorities, and it gets stopped. So that balance we talked about of how do we control the carrying capacity of the site. We don't want to overpopulate it, but we also want to have eyes and ears there from all of you who are going to be future stewards. So important question to consider.
From Maryland, will you consider partnering educationally with schools to foster stewardship in children?
Absolutely. Please contact us.
From Cody, I know the pond has been stocked with trout in recent years on the Wizard Ranch. The pond structure does need some attention due to flooding a few years back. Also, I believe archery hunting would be a great opportunity for hunters in our area. I walk this property daily, being a neighbor. Would you open this to the public hunting or base it off the number of permits a year?
Yeah, similar to some of the previous questions, but certainly we're going to consider that.
From Patricia, will the stone foundation on the 1700s Lehman farm be preserved or removed?
Again, to be determined.
And obviously we would have ADR mob or look at that to determine the relevance of that structure. With Angie, when you open Wizard Ranch up to deer hunting, there is a lot of fields and open space. I'm concerned if you will open it up to rifle hunting. I strongly recommend archery only.
Okay, thanks for that suggestion.
Philip, some trails lead to private land on the River Drive. How will that be addressed?
Those trails could be eliminated if they're problematic, certainly.
Yeah. From our next attendee, some of these lands are quite hilly. Is there a possibility of access for people with disabilities and ADA fishing access along the Susquehanna River would be a great asset?
Yeah, certainly we can't provide ADA accessibility in areas that are incredibly steep. We're going to have to choose areas that are ADA accessible that we can achieve that without creating scars in the landscape. So, and thanks for
we can also look at, there are standards for trails, and a lot of that involves the signage so that people understand what type of trail they're approaching as they hike the site.
Mm-hmm.
From Fred Owens. Firstly, the Helms Township Environmental Advisory Council will also wish to be a partner. Secondly, Yay for bobolinks. We would love to accommodate them here.
All right, thank you.
From Jason, would be great to highlight some of the historical significance on the property. There are many old stone foundations throughout the property. The Wildcat Run was a historically significant recreation area. It would be great to know the history of the various parts of the property.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my, I'm looking forward to getting to the water departments or water companies' historic archives. I'm sure there's going to be great information there for us.
From Nick, Susquehanna Area Mountain Bike Association, or SAMBA, would be happy to participate in discussions based around shared use trail development opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
We will add you to our partners. From Ed, to what extent are the lands open to the public before facilities are constructed and new trails blazed?
Yeah, I think, Ed, that was, Brandon addressed that previously. The Mason-Dixon Trail is open. It has a blue blaze. And there's also a white trail over near Wildcat Run that's open. So those are the two trails that are open now. And as Brandon requested, if you can stay on those trails for the time being, that would be tremendous.
From Melissa, she notes this goal. Would love to see connections made between City of York and Lancaster to bring these areas to the attention of all residences in both counties.
Great, good suggestion.
From Jack, the meetup group Lancaster Area Paddlers would love to help in any way needed.
Okay, thank you.
We'll add you to our partners, Jack.
Yeah.
From Alyssa, I think opportunities for education would be nice, whether passive or active, history of site, special plant communities, species, wildlife, etc. Perhaps connecting to the mobile app for hikers will be able to access would be interesting.
Okay, thank you.
From John, as the areas get used more over time, would certain locations be required to be sectioned off or cycled to maintain certain habitat?
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, sort of like rotating athletic fields. So we'll certainly consider that.
Yeah, and I think, Mike, I know in your past work with
Yeah.
meadow restoration and mown lawns, pathways.
Yeah, so two things. One, we're going to do our effort level best to identify those special areas and do trail design and access to make sure that we're not impeding those to begin with. But yeah, should there be a significant amount of use within a trail, especially mown trails, we will provide some strategies for temporary movements to restore those trails. Or yeah, so great comment, well received.
Great. From Eric, with the growth of disc golf and benefits to the community, could this recreational activity be a possible discussion?
Yeah, we'd be happy to talk about that with you, Eric.
From Greg, a suggestion. Several parks in Maryland utilize hunting permits for access to generate revenue. Using this method would be an added way to generate extra revenue as well as control the amount of hunters accessing the land.
Yeah, I think a good suggestion. We're aware of those programs, and we'll certainly add that to the list of considerations.
We have another attendee noting that disc golf would be an interesting activity to include here. From Kervin, my wife is asking if there will be any trails available for horse riding.
Yeah, again, to be determined. Certainly reach out to us. We're not right now aware of what kind of a horse community is within what proximity of these sites. So certainly let us know.
From Allison, Brandon mentioned that the Mason-Dixon Trail reroute phase 1. Are the plans for another reroute so it moves through the site even more rather than along the road?
We don't have, again, part of the master plan is to look at the good work the Conservancy's done. Certainly possible. We don't have any plans at this point. Again, we're just starting this process. From
Kevin, are picnicking areas with possible playground equipment for young families, picnic tables, and outdoor grills being considered?
It's certainly, we can add it to the list. I mean, play areas, I don't think anybody would like to see bright orange and purple and green, metal coated or plastic coated metal play equipment here. But, there's a new trend called nature-based play, which most of us kids did just out in nature anyway. So, we'll look at that idea, certainly.
Chris mentioned Samba, just noting that they are design and build experts in the area for their expertise regarding what works best for bike users of all levels. Their services are free for design, construction, and maintenance of multi-use trails that bikes will use, and can also include bridge structures where they may make sense.
Right, thank you, Chris.
John, due to a most likely a good dark sky condition, could stargazing seasons be set up?
Sessions be set up. Thank you,
Thank you.
John. Yeah, great idea. Programming, whether it's by the Conservancy or with local groups is, can add really to the richness of using the site over time.
From Katina, I believe that the plan should have the word river in the title. All the places touch the river. Katina and Creek Valley Preservation Society, our local residents, when we interview them, always refer to the river hills.
Okay, thanks for sharing.
Following up to that, Dugan's Run was Layman's Run originally. Would you please begin to use that name?
We'll look at the history and let you know as we go through this. Thank you.
And then one last thought, will the Mifflin parcel be included in this plan?
Yeah, Brandon, I don't know that name. Maybe you do.
The Mifflin parcel is a tract of land that our partner, the Susquehanna National Heritage Area, is attempting to develop. It's at the exit of Wrightsville, the Wrightsville exit there behind the corporate park. And it is not part of this plan, even though they are a partner of ours.
Okay, thanks, Phil. So that's about 70 some odd questions, and we're pretty much at the end of our hour and a half session. I'm going to ask Sarah or Rob to go to just a final couple of slides that sort of close out our meeting for tonight. And again, thank you again, everybody, for participating and the great questions. There is a project website at the Conservancy where here's the URL address that you can access the information. This presentation will be up in a couple days, so you can review it again. There's also will be a recording. And then on May 3rd, we're going to open up a public user input survey where we will have a series of questions for you to answer. It'll probably take you about 10 or 12 minutes to complete the survey. We're going to ask you about some of your recreational habits, where you go now to enjoy natural lands and preserved lands, and ask you about some ideas. We'll, I'm sure, include some of the things we heard tonight and get your opinions on those. And that survey is going to be open from May 3rd all the way to the end of August, which gives all of you time to do that. We've had close to 100 people at the meeting most of tonight, so please tell your friends and colleagues about this initiative and ask them to complete the survey too. Just as a reminder, we will have our second public meeting in September after we hopefully go through a much less stressful summer where we all get to enjoy being outdoors and our friends a little more than we've been able to. And then you can see the other meeting dates moving forward into the future. And then our last slide here is just contact information for Sarah and Rob and myself. We'll leave this up for a couple seconds. You can also go to our website and find it there. And certainly you'll find our phone number too. Feel free to give us a call. We will return calls. We'll get back to you on emails. And, part of our charge is to be available to all of you to listen to your ideas and vision for the property as we go forward. So with that, I'm just going to turn it back over to Brandon or Phil or anyone from the Conservancy who might want to make a couple closing comments.
Phil, I'm looking at you. I'm wondering if you'd like to speak outside of the Q&A here.
Thanks. I really appreciate everybody coming out tonight. My name is Phil Wenger. I serve as the leader of the Lancaster Conservancy. Brandon and I work very closely together. I just want to take one opportunity to help clarify something that I didn't hear real clear tonight. There is a huge difference between a public park and a nature preserve. Public parks have tons of active rec, lots of amenities, restrooms, playgrounds, you know, all of those kinds of things. But the Conservancy is committed to doing a nature preserve, where while public has access, habitat restoration, creating a wildlife refuge trumps all of that public rec. And so we partner up with parks and local parks to be able to provide a lot of that stuff that we won't be doing on this nature preserve. And so with people that have parks in mind and want this to be a public park, I just wanted to make sure we're clear. This is a nature preserve with public access. And so I think as we work together here to find the way that public can come in and interact with the natural world is something that we clearly want to do, and we want to be able to meet all of the kinds of recommendations and questions that you have. But I just wanted to make that sort of clarification of who we are as a private land trust who opens our lands to the public. So thank you again, everyone, for coming out tonight and giving us these comments. We look forward to all the partnerships that we're going to create in Hellam Township and with the municipality. And I'm really excited about this plan that we're going to embark on together over the next 12 months.